if we look at alcohol-free wine in the way that I looked at my first generation of electric car,
Mm.
it was not a product that most people driving conventional petrol diesel cars would find acceptable as an alternative. You could say if you live in the center of town and you only drive a few kilometers every day, it works and you can plug it in at night. For most people, it did not really fit the bill.
No.
Today, you think about what China is already doing with its electric cars, and you've got 500-mile ranges, and you can charge them really quickly. And we know that's a one-way street. We know that's a one-way street. We're heading in one direction. What I'm saying is that you and I hopefully will have a conversation in a year or two or three, and we will say, actually, look how much better they are, just like natural wine, how
Yeah.
much more acceptable they are.
Welcome to another episode of On the Road Edition, hosted by Stevie Kim. Each week, Stevie travels to incredible wine destinations, interviewing some of the Italian wine scene's most interesting personalities, talking about wines, the foods, as well as the incredible travel destinations.
So, Robert, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I got through my prostate cancer thing last year, which gave me a period of not being allowed to have alcohol, coffee, or tea. And I have to say, which may shock some of my wine friends, I missed coffee more than I missed the other two.
Oh, really? I stopped drinking coffee like 2 years ago.
The interesting thing is psychologically, I'm now supposed only to have decaffeinated coffee, and no, none of my Italian friends consider that to be coffee, I'm sure. All I can tell you is there is a psychological thing, and this is something we could talk about. There is something psychological about making coffee and drinking coffee, even when it doesn't have the caffeine in it, that you actually imagine you're having the coffee experience, even when you know that the drug isn't there. And I don't know if somebody could come up with weed that doesn't have any THC in it. Or all I can tell you is I also drank during that period some zero alcohol wine and indeed some other beverages. And no, they're not as good as wine. We know they're not as good as wine, but they were a better and a different experience to drinking Coca-Cola or water. And those were the other alternatives or
So
juice.
now are you allowed to,
I'm allowed wine. I'm allowed alcohol now, which is
right?
cool. The interesting thing is I've got a good friend here in Bordeaux who voluntarily keeps going off wine for his own reasons. So I can't even have a glass of wine with him because he's off it. But I'm on alcohol, but I'm still on decaffeinated coffee.
Okay. So, Robert, why are you in Bordeaux now? Why did you move from
It was a time to make a change for all sorts of reasons. And Bordeaux, I did a book on Bordeaux 20 years ago,
mhm.
Bordeaux and its wines, and it was about the region and the city. And if you'd asked me then, would you live in Bordeaux? I would have said to you, there isn't enough money in the world to pay me to do that. I thought it was a dull, stuffy, British, middle class, French, bourgeois, you know, etc. I didn't like it, to be honest.
Right.
I found nice things to say about it for the book, but I really didn't like it. It's changed. It has changed radically. It's one of those places, Melbourne is another, by the way, that has become younger. It's become much more of a university city. It's
Oh,
vibrant.
really?
It's a completely different place now. The pedestrian streets, which existed then, have really come alive. And no, it's a cool place to be, and it's very convenient. I'm making wine in Georgia. I'm still doing stuff in Germany. I'm making wine down the road in Languedoc. It's reasonably central. I can get onto a plane and go anywhere. I can come and see you in Verona very easily, and it's a cool city.
Well, you'd have to go to Paris or
I
Lyon, I suppose.
probably would, but anyway, it's doable. Let's put it that way.
Right,
There are
right.
trains as well.
So are you living in town or
I'm
like
living in town, almost in Bordeaux has a center, but it's a reasonably spread center. I'm near something called the Grosse Cloche, which is the big clock tower, which is one of the things tourists will come and look at, and it's about 100 meters around the corner. Fortunately,
Yeah,
I'm
I
not.
know where that is.
Yeah, but I'm around the corner from that. So,
Okay, excellent.
and I'm surrounded by places to have coffee, decaffeinated or otherwise, wine bars, places I can go and eat Caribbean food from just about anywhere. I mean, it's a good place to be.
So listen, it's 2026 and
Is it?
yes,
Really?
I wanted to talk to you about your Substack series, right? The pieces, the recent one. You've called it What to Look Forward to and Fear in 2026.
Yeah.
So far, I see three parts. Are
Three
there
parts
more
is at the moment,
coming?
3 parts is enough. I think they were long reads, and everyone tells me not to do long reads, but they turned out to be long reads. And I think that's probably enough. Everybody does predictions. And
Right.
there are lots of predictions around, and a lot of them are very good. I wanted to do something a little bit different, and I wanted to be based on some kind of fact that I had picked up on. And one of the most interesting, in a way, and a lot of these will not be things that the wine industry will welcome. That was where the word fear came in. And one of them was the sugar thing, which is I'm predicting that we are going to acknowledge that residual sweetness is part of the wine picture for a far larger number of people than is generally acknowledged. Now, Tim Hannay, MW, has been saying this for a long time. But what caught my attention
But
was
he
that
doesn't drink, right? He's a non-drinker.
he's
Tim
he's an
Hannay.
ex-drinker, but
Yeah.
MW, yeah. But he has done lots of work on super tasters and palates and so on. And his view is that there is a percentage of people, which is like probably 25 to 30%, who are naturally attuned to want sweetness. Now, my daughter is probably one of those, and my son is probably not. My son was here staying last week, and he will very happily skip. There's chocolate on the table, he will skip it. Or there's a piece of cake, he'll have a small piece, he won't have any more. My daughter will have more. I'm probably more like my daughter. It's to do, the more sensitive your taste buds are, apparently, the more you like sweetness. But anyway, putting that to one side, the kernel, the seed of that piece was something that I don't think most people in the wine industry are aware of, and maybe why should they? Bordeaux has created another appellation. We can talk about the logic of this in a minute, called Bordeaux Claret, because there used to be a word called claret, and
Yes.
we've
But that was
revived the word
over-encompassing,
for
right?
claret. However, there is also a word called claret. Now, claret is a really useful word, and I'm using it for my rosé pink wine in Georgia because it's a nice word for a dark rosé. But the French have said, right, let's have claret and claret, and let's leave people to be confused. But claret, their new designation, it's been a couple of years, but nobody's really talking about it, is lighter, less tannic, less structured red wine.
So less of everything.
Yeah, not necessarily less alcoholic, though.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing they've done is buried in the rules is this thing saying it can have up to 7 grams of sugar, which is quite a lot. Obviously, it depends how much acid you've got and so on, but 7 grams is significant. I wouldn't, in my Le Grand Noir wines or my wines in Georgia, we wouldn't dream of having a 7-gram wine. So why have they done that? They did it as a simple, somebody said, look, if we're picking grapes at 14, 14 and a half, and we want to make a lighter wine, well, one of the ways to do that is to actually not ferment all the sugar, in which case,
leave the sugar.
So either we're pick early, de-alcoholized, which is not allowed at the moment, but maybe it will be, or this thing of leaving the sugar in. But the moment you're leaving 7 grams of sugar in, you're then saying to people, Bordeaux can be slightly sweet. And the interesting thing is there aren't very many of these Bordeaux clarets on the market yet, and none of the ones I've tasted are sweet yet because they're made by French winemakers who don't like the idea of wine being sweet. But somebody is going to get the handle on this, I think, and do it. Because when I'm wandering around Bordeaux, the interesting thing is I see signs on bistros, bars saying, we have rosé, semi-sweet rosé or semi-dry rosé. There definitely is a taste for off-dry wine in France where people have been taught not to want it, same in Italy. But then you look at the US and you look at the UK and you look at Spain, and the brand, again, that doesn't necessarily get as much notice as it deserves is Mucho Mas, which is made by Felix Solis. And it's a brilliant brand. It's called the Governor in the Majestic chain in the UK, and it's called Mucho Mas everywhere else, much more. And it has 18 grams of sugar. And it's red. There's a white as well. There's the sparkling thing.
Wow,
There's
18 grams.
18 grams is huge. And the interesting thing is, but it's a rich red wine. And I've sat down with middle-class British wine drinkers who I was asked, they were having a party and they wanted some help on which wine to buy. And they bought 2 or 3 bottles 5 bottles to taste. And one of them was Mucho Mas. And I hadn't at that time, this is a while back, hadn't tasted it before. And it is mellow, it's soft, it's rich. Yeah, it's a bit sweet, but that isn't the first thing that you come across. And I did some work, some consultancy work a few years ago for Laithwaite's, also the Sunday Times Wine Club and other names, direct wines. And this is at one of their events, and they had lots of 50-plus-year-old British men who were Bordeaux drinkers. And we gave them a set of wines to taste and a set of cards with fruits and so on. So you taste these wines. Do you get any more blackcurrant or cherry or strawberry or raspberry? And what price would you pay, and would you buy it? And of course, the trick was it was the same wine with different levels of sugar, which none of them spotted. Interestingly, of the mass of people in that room, we had about 50, I think, who did it, probably 5 noticed the sweetness. The other 45 said, there's more cherry, there's more raspberry, there's more blackcurrant. I like it more. And most of them said they liked it more and they'd buy it. So this is Bordeaux drinkers. This is, middle-aged to older British men who drink Bordeaux actually preferred it with a bit of sweetness. So I think that we are, if you look at Meiomi, which has 19 grams of sugar in America, look at a number of other brands in the States, either you've got high alcohol, which gives you a perception of sweetness, and or you've got sweetness. Apothic, there's definitely sweetness. And then you look at stuff like XXL, you look at Stella Rosa and so on. There's a lot of wines out there with some sweetness that the wine fraternity doesn't want to acknowledge existing.
Yeah, I guess there's they kind of try to obscure sweetness with fruit.
Yep.
I think maybe that's kind of I'm not saying they're going to try to obfuscate, but that's kind of the game, I think, right?
But Barolo, there was some sweetness in Barolo back in the day. There were lots of wines.
Not anymore, though, in any way,
but back
shape,
in
or
the day.
form.
But we've kind of said it's like people used to wear those kind of clothes and now they can't wear those kind of clothes in an age which I think is proscriptive in all sorts of ways. But I think the wine industry is in trouble, as we know, and brands like Mucho Mas are doing well. And Meiomi's done pretty well. So, there is a very clear motivation for producers to say, I'm going to play this game. Now, whether I would do it, no, I wouldn't. But here, for example, we sell wine in Poland, my Le Grand Noir, and the Poles have asked us to do an off-dry red for Poland because Poland loves red wine, sweet red wine. Georgia, my production partners in Georgia, are shipping huge amounts of sweet Georgian red wine to neighboring countries in Eastern Europe. Russia loves that stuff. So I think, it is, as I wrote in the piece, it's the love that dare not speak its name that we're not allowed to talk about. But it's kind of the softcore porn of this world where everyone's quietly looking at OnlyFans, but they're not actually admitting it. And a lot of people are drinking or want to drink off-dry wine. And rosé is probably the best. Rosé, Prosecco. How many people want dry Prosecco? Most people want extra dry. Rosé off-dry, quite a lot of white with a bit of sweetness to it. There's a lot of it out there.
So you see a sugar component is quite influential,
I think we're going to see A, more sweetness in wine, and B, we'll see probably, I don't know how easy it's going to be, but I think we'll see more acknowledgement of it by some wine people who are going to say, okay, we admit this is happening. But the Bordeaux move was the first step in that direction that caught my attention.
So listen, let's just quickly, this is a good segue into the 3-part series. Quickly go over your articles. First of all, when did you start the Substack series?
I started it really, I went on the Substack without really doing very much on it early last year, and then Meininger's International closed.
Right.
And I really thought, I need somewhere that I can express
You need an outlet.
I need an outlet. And so I tried it. We're now close on 2,000 subscribers, which is very nice. That's like 6 months, I guess. Not that many are paying, but I haven't been making them pay yet. That's beginning to happen. So on the 3-part series, the first part was behind a paywall. It's now not. The second one, I'm going to take away the paywall. So what you're going to see is either old stuff will be behind a paywall or some new stuff will be behind a paywall for a while. But there's always stuff there that people can see. And I like Substack. Every man and his dog is now doing Substack, I guess.
Yeah, it's a very popular medium
But
now.
I hope that what I'm doing is in line with what I did at Meininger's. So people who like what I do and like the way I look at the wine world will appreciate my Substack stuff, and people who don't won't.
Okay, so let's just go over the three-part pieces, the Substack series. They're all called What to Look Forward to and Fear in 2026 and Beyond. The first bit was all about the Vine pullouts and the shrinking production, as well as, I guess, the health trends, right? The GLP-1 drugs.
Yeah, those are two
So,
separate things, but they're obviously
yeah,
related.
why did you put them together?
Because I think, well, let's start with the Vine pull. The thing is, I think we're in denial. The wine industry is in heavy denial. And I drive through Languedoc, and some beautiful old vineyards have gone between this time last year and this year. And we're not talking about that. I was in California, in Lodi, huge 7% of Californian vineyards have come up. We're not talking about that. And everywhere I go, Spain, a lot of stuff's coming out. It's just coming out in all sorts of places. We hear more about it in Europe because the growers go to the government and ask for subsidies. In America, there are no subsidies. There are no subsidies in Australia. But vines are coming out in a lot of places and more than one imagines. And when somebody said to me, oh, yeah, they're uprooting vines in Luxembourg, I thought, how many have they got in the first place? So why are we uprooting vines? Well, firstly, everyone says, well, consumption is going down. The people were not making much money in the first place. So the consumers drinking less wine is the straw on the camel's back. There's another straw, which I referred to in the piece, I think, which is a generational change and a succession issue, where essentially, all this, and I'm writing something at the moment about the romance of wine. Wine is romantic. This is a time of year where there are people out in the vineyards with secateurs. And I can tell you, I've done it. There's nothing romantic being in a cold region in January in the Northern Hemisphere, actually going out dealing with vines. Now, the thing is, and this is a statistic I put in the piece, a huge number, 83% of the vineyards in France are small. They're tiny vineyards. These belong to mom and pop families who belong to the local cooperative, and they take their little trailer and they drive down, and they don't get much money, but it's kind of the hobby, and they get some wine back that they drink. But these men and women are getting older. Who is going to do the work on the weekends and in the evenings? Their sons and daughters have moved away from home anyway, but they don't want to do it. There's no money in it. They're getting
It's hard work.
There's less money per liter per kilo than there probably was in real terms 10 years ago. And it's hard work. So that's not happening. So we've got a lot of people actually thinking this is not worth it. I can't sell the vineyards. That's the other thing. There's no market for vineyards in most places. So we uproot. So I think the uprooting was going to happen anyway. I have a friend called Simona Lusa, who's a professor at Geisenheim University, with whom I exchanged a lot of information. She's seeing it everywhere. You go to Germany, you look at some very steep vineyards, and if they're not the famous steep vineyards, they're really hard work. But again, these people are not making much money from them. And you think of Italy, there are lots of places in Italy where vines are coming out that we're just not really talking about very much. The Italians will probably be slower than many places.
Yeah, I just feel like Italians are just very, very resistant to the vine pull schemes.
They are, but little by little, as I said, you've still got that problem of the generations. So if it's not today, it'll be tomorrow, it'll be the day after. Then we've got, in terms of why people are not drinking, there's all sorts of lifestyle changes. The thing that we don't think about is that there are a lot more alternatives today. Today, you don't have to do what your parents did. You don't have to do what society said. So I'm old enough to remember when, if you went to a dinner party, it was couples all round. And if you didn't have a partner, your host would find you a partner of the opposite sex, because that made the table right. Point one. And then everybody ate the meat and everybody drank the red wine. Now, today, you think about it, firstly, at that table, you've probably got two men together or two women together as a couple. Why not? That couple might be a different couple next time they come. They may have actually become male, female, or not. Nobody cares anymore. When it comes to the food, actually, I don't eat meat, or I don't eat meat during the week.
You're a vegetarian?
I don't mean meat. No, sorry, that's I'm saying the guest.
Oh, okay. I was
a guest.
When did that happen? You moved to Bordeaux and you're a vegetarian?
I keep hearing it, right? So, oh, I don't eat fish. I don't. Okay, so we'll do something special for them. And oh, besides, I don't do red wine. I'd rather have white wine. Okay, we'll do that. Actually, I don't do wine, or I don't do wine during the week. All of that is now acceptable. We're allowed to live the way we want to live, and we accommodate our friends and our colleagues. That's really important because it means they're not pressurized. That the pressure of drinking alcohol, which was huge, you got have a drink,
Yeah.
have another drink, that is far less acceptable today, number one. But secondly, there are all these alternatives. So I've just come back from Georgia, where we are working on a really exciting project. We're making sparkling tea. So I'm doing a zero alcohol wine in France,
Hmm.
and I'm doing sparkling tea in Georgia, and I'm committed to both. It's much easier to make a really delicious sparkling tea with some grape juice and some other things than it is to do de-alcoholized wine. I think they'll have different markets. So I think the two of them have different reasons to exist. But my point is, I think we're going to see people saying, what am I going to drink now? My friend I mentioned earlier, who goes off alcohol every now and then for a week or two or three, he's on de-alcoholized beer when he's not drinking alcohol. He's fine.
So your part two is all about alcohol-free wine, the de-alcoholized wine. So you think it's also getting some serious investment, right?
Basically, my point, and again, I'm trying to do these predictions using data, facts, numbers, or whatever. And what I've done there is I've just listed all of the brands that are now in the zero alc,
Hmm.
and I've done a separate piece, but I think it's also, again, we don't talking about very much, what we call mid strength. And mid strength could be lower, but it's like 6 to 10% ABV. And I think this is going to be a growing area. Why? Well, A, because people want lighter wine and less alcohol, okay. But B, you've got two countries in the world that are actually helping this happen. One of them is Finland, where up until now, all wine had to be bought through state monopolies, which is a pain. You've got to go and find the monopoly store.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
changed it, 8% or less, you can now buy in your local supermarket. And if you go onto the
Aha.
Substack, you'll find a video I did in a Finnish supermarket with all of the brands that are there. And so you like JP Chenet, you like Torres, you like that. It's there. And that's just Finland. Finland's not exactly the world's biggest market, but it
No.
is in the Nordics. And what Finland does today, Sweden, bigger market, may well do next. So a lot of brands have got in there already. A lot of brands are doing it in their own market. So Gallo has got a 6% wine in the States, where there's no pressure on them to do that. And then you've got the UK, where we have our tax on alcohol, mad, but we've got it, is by the 0.5% ABV. So the tax, and our taxes are very high, the tax on an 8% wine is far lower than the similar wine from the same people would be at 13.5 or 14. I mean, there's a real difference in cost. So if you're selling in the UK, there's a lot of incentive to be exploring this mid-strength category. So on the one hand, you've got mid-strength, and the other, you've got zero alcohol. And zero alcohol, I think there are so many reasons that we're not talking about for zero alcohol. And I think we've obsessed, or the wine industry has obsessed with the World Health Organization and cancer. And my friend Laura Catena has done some really good stuff on doing it. We're countering that, and the recent advisory from America is certainly less draconian than
Well,
what we
did
had
you see
before.
the article that came out with the WHO saying, the wine and also sugary drinks? This is interesting.
Yep.
They
Yep.
coupled them together is too affordable,
Yeah.
right?
So
So,
basically, we've got this battle. The affordability we'll talk about separately if you like, but essentially, wine is relatively cheap when you compare it to bottled water. It's not that expensive in a lot of places. Or, sorry, cheap wine. Some people would say is too cheap. And
mm,
we could also argue that Red Bull is too expensive. But let's go back to why people are doing zero alcohol. And this is something that I get quite annoyed with the wine and the alcohol lobbyists who, firstly, especially now because it's January and dry January, I really don't like wine. People who earn a living from wine, making it, distributing it, talking about it, writing about it, telling people not to do dry January. This, to me, is exactly like cattle farmers and butchers saying, don't do Lent. If people choose
Interesting.
not to eat meat or not to use their computer, smartphones, there are all sorts of reasons for people not to do something that they think may have become a bit habitual. I know too many people in the wine industry, I know people in the hospitality industry who do dry January. So you lose weight if you do dry January. There's no question. You may sleep better.
But how prevalent is it? Like, I mean, where you are,
Well,
like
in Bordeaux,
where
I don't think it's that prevalent. In the UK, I mean, it's anecdotal, and I don't necessarily believe the survey figures. But essentially, there are a lot of people who do it or do something like it. And my point about it is essentially forget the cancer thing for a minute. I think crucially, cancer is something that I know personally is something that can well hit you when you are 5, 6, 7 decades old. Most 20, 30-year-olds are not really thinking or worrying about cancer on a daily basis. What they're worried about, or what they think about, is healthiness, well-being.
yeah, wellness.
And that's, to me, wellness, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. But it's actually, the thing about it is it's very tangible. How did you sleep? You went to the gym this morning and you weren't able to do what you would like to do at the gym. And your trainer says, hold on, what did you do last night? And yeah, I went out for a few drinks. That is the reason. And by the way, I don't know if you see it, your watch, your smartwatch, or your Fitbit, whatever it is telling you your blood oxygen figures. I don't look at my blood oxygen figures. A lot of people do. And there is a definite correlation between the amount of alcohol you have. And so what you're seeing is people who are saying, right, I'm going to cut down on alcohol, which brings me back to the lower strength wines, or people who are zebra drinking. So in other words, at the beginning of the evening, they'll have a zero alcohol. They'll have a zero alcohol beer, for example. They'll have a glass of full strength wine or whatever, but they'll be switching back and forth. So we don't necessarily have a cohort of non-drinkers. We have that cohort of people who say, right, I'm not going to drink during January, or I'm not going to drink through October. Or my friend who I mentioned earlier, who he was going through some emotional stuff. And when that happens, he says, I stop drinking. There are tough times. He said, I take a week or two off. And that's happening more and more. And there are other people who now don't drink from Monday through Friday, the same as for people who don't eat meat, flexitarians, Monday through Friday. And I think this is going to be more and more significant. And then, since we're talking about these predictions, I want to go back to the fat jabs or the anti-fat jabs or the weight loss drugs or whatever. And when I wrote something about, or somebody else wrote something about this online the other day on LinkedIn, and how is it going to affect the drinks industry? And a British wine writer who shall remain nameless went, yawn, exclamation mark. Well, I'm sorry about this, but can I tell you that two of our British food chains are reacting? One of our supermarkets has brought in food specially for people on these drugs, the GLP drugs, and these are a game changer. Why are they a game changer? Because we have an obesity crisis, number one. We have that globally. China has the worst obesity crisis in terms of the numbers of them, because there are a lot of Chinese. So obesity is a big problem because it gives you, on the one hand, it gives you dangers of diabetes, which needs to be handled. On the other hand, it gives you severe risk of extracardio events, right? So we know, as whether we're governments looking after the welfare of our health of our populace, or insurance companies, we really don't want these things to be happening because they're expensive. Until now, the injections have been relatively expensive, and they're injections. So they've been limited to people that the medical fraternity really think need the treatment, which was the diabetics originally, and now severely obese people, and the wealthy, the people who can afford to pay, and it's $1,000 a month or whatever the figure was, to actually lose the weight. And we know it works. But the interesting thing, what is interesting to me, is that those prices already have come down. Trump has actually made them come down in the States. But we're going to see a huge fall in price because the patent in China has just come off. These drugs have existed for a long time for diabetes, so the patent has had time to run out. Second patent, there's two different kinds of GLPs, but the second patent will take longer. But essentially, we are going to see, A, the big names are going to come down in price, and B, we're going to see generics and copies and so on coming through, and they are going to be encouraged. And you are going, anecdotally, if you don't know anyone who's taken them, I'd be surprised. I
Well,
certainly,
I mean, I know so many.
right.
Also, I'm a New Yorker, and like I just like instinctively, I just don't know what to say because I'm not sure in the long term because now everyone's excited about it, how
Well,
it really affects your health, you
well,
know?
there's two things. One is, well, I think they've got quite, because of the diabetic use, they're not as new as we think they are. We've been giving them to people with diabetes for a long time. So I think we know more about their health effects than maybe we might. But that's the big thing is that they seem to be a treatment that you have to stay on because they're very hard to get off the
Yeah,
body.
forever.
So, so you start taking these at the age of 50 and you're going to die at 80 or whatever, 90. That's a lot of years of taking a drug. But okay, put that to one side. And by the way, sorry, the thing I didn't say is that we're now moving from the injection, which nobody likes very much, to pill form.
Yeah, which will
So
be much more
whether you or I
accessible.
like it is not the point.
Yeah,
I think that essentially
you're right.
there's going to be
I
a
agree.
lot more of it, and it is going to affect the way we behave. It's going to affect the restaurant industry hugely. It's affecting the fast food people are really worried about it, and they're all looking about what do we do
Well, the
to.
diet industry in general.
Well, diet industry is almost the smallest, if you like, because actually McDonald's is huge. And McDonald's, you're going to be driving down the road and you're not going to want to stop. And if you do want to stop, you're going to have a smaller portion of everything. So that's not the whole supersize me thing doesn't fare very well in a world where people are not actually don't have that appetite. And
Yeah.
then if you're not having all those meals in restaurants and we're not necessarily having the same kind of meals at home, that's another reason why we wouldn't necessarily be drinking as much wine, which anecdotally, and this is anecdotal at the moment, at least some people lose their taste for wine and alcohol in general. And we have seen this data, research done with rats, there's research done with alcoholics, where they certainly lose the taste for alcohol. What we haven't seen yet is research done on average drinkers who are overweight. But I'm saying that as an industry, if we're not acknowledging this, by the way, goes directly counter in some ways to the thing I'm talking about, sugar in wine. But the two things I think can coexist. But I think as wine businesses, whether we're making it or distributing it or whatever we're doing, I think we just have to be a lot more aware of the world in which we live. The only thing that we kind of acknowledge as in the world in which we live that's affecting us until now is tariffs, governments suddenly affecting us in that way. But all of these other lifestyle changes, I think, are going to affect us as businesses. And we're already in a financially, economically fragile state. And I think that's the most important part of this is if we were a robust industry, we could take more of these headwinds more easily.
So I want to just go back before we close just 1 nanosecond to your point to mid-strength and off-dry wines.
Yeah.
That's your next battleground, right? So why do you think these styles may succeed where kind of the no load, zero alcohol sometimes struggles?
Oh, I think it's very simple. No low wine, no low alcohol, no low beer is not struggling.
Yeah.
Now, why is no low beer
Beer.
not struggling? Beer. Why is no low beer not struggling? Because, firstly, beer is much easier to de-alcoholize than wine. It's starting off with a less complex product with much less alcohol. Wine is very complex, and we've got 13, 14%. Start from there. The second thing is the brewers have been working on making zero alcohol beer for a very long time
Mm.
and have invested millions into it. The wine industry has not. So everything we're doing with wine is very new. But just as I've seen an improvement in natural wine over the last 5, 10 years, I've seen a huge improvement in zero alcohol wine. The one we're making in France is very palatable. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it.
So
Not,
you're doing also.
I'm doing it, but I'm not saying it's great, and it's certainly not as
I
good.
don't know. I've not tasted one, which I really would say I love it.
No, and so far, I will be honest and say I haven't seen one that I've said I love it. But what I said earlier, when I was not allowed to drink alcohol,
Right.
I was prepared to compromise So I wasn't saying, oh, yippee, I'm going to drink some of that zero alcohol stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to drink something that isn't Coca-Cola and isn't water. But two things are happening. One is the technology is improving incredibly quickly, and
Okay.
not just the technology. So it's interesting. Kylie Minogue's rosé, zero rosé, is an absolute bestseller in the UK. Zero. She does a rosé, full strength rosé and a zero alc. But Elton John,
That's Zonine, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
but that's de-alkalized. I'm not sure. No, Zoni makes a prosecco. I'm not sure of the rosé. But Elton John is just launching a
Yeah, I
zero
saw that. He's all
alcohol
over the
sparkling wine,
social.
and it's very coherent because Elton John hasn't drunk wine or alcohol for 30 years. And the interesting thing is the product that he's launching, which I haven't had the chance to taste yet, is not de-alkalized. It's fermented with yeasts that aren't creating the alcohol. So what we're seeing is a huge change in the way these things are being produced. Either the dealcoholization is more sophisticated, still uses a lot of energy, it's expensive, and we're seeing new things, number one. But secondly, and put alongside that, we're going to see all of these alternatives, the sparkling teas, and the things about sparkling teas and the proxies, is that, and as I said, I'm in this business. What we're trying to do is give people a wine adjacent, a wine-like experience. We're not saying this is as good as a great Burgundy. We're not going to say it's going to give you the same experience as if you're drinking a Brunello. What we're saying is going to give you a good experience at a time where, for whatever reason, you have chosen not to drink alcohol. If you can and want to drink alcohol, you will drink alcohol. But there are going to be times where you're going to say, actually, I'm driving and it's a zero alcohol rule for drivers. I've got a health reason, whatever the thing is, you're saying, I don't want to drink alcohol and I want to drink something nice. And that's really as simple as we get. And I think that my problem with the wine industry, particularly, is there's a kind of religious feeling about, and it's almost like, you've got to worship in our temple. You can't go and put your temple over
Yeah,
there.
I mean, it's the most, I would say very safely that they see it as a personal attack,
Yeah.
you know?
And all I'm saying is, and the point I was trying to make in these pieces is, whilst those wine industry people who see it as a personal attack should be aware that there's a whole chunk of the wine industry that has said, right, this may or may not actually affect our bottom line on our full strength, but we're going to get into this business. And a lot of very big, serious wine companies have got into that business. Gallo has yet to do it with zero alcohol. They've done it with low alcohol, with 6%. I am going to predict, and Gallo is interesting as a company, they have rarely been the first out of the trench. They're very often waited, happened with White Zinfandel and so on. They're very often do a lot of technical stuff in the background, testing stuff, but they let other people go through the minefield first. And I think Gallo has allowed that to happen. But LVMH have invested. That's
Yeah,
significant.
in part, right? I mean, it's just a partial investment. You mean
It's an
you're talking
investment.
about French
But
Bloom,
my point
right?
is that the LVMH, there's a reputational aspect to this as well. They've chosen to back that horse.
Yeah.
And the horse itself, have you tried French Bloom?
Yes, because I think it was like actually two, not last minutely, even before that.
Yeah.
I saw two, yes, because it's when I had Détanger also like
Yep.
Vitaly doing the course. And so I saw these two French Bloom bottles. But like at my office,
Yep.
during Vinitaly, it's just like everyone brings wine and they
Yep.
can
Yep.
drink everything. And it was zero alcohol. And I said, well, who bought this? And no one could figure it out. But usually when it's at the bar, anyone can drink it.
Yep.
No one went near it.
No.
So finally I took a bottle home and I said, because none of my wine people drank it. Nobody wanted to even try it.
Yeah.
They were not even curious. Right. So I brought a bottle home. I posted and I said, well, who bought me this bottle? Because I was just curious. And it turned out it was actually Shawen who bought it because Avignonesi is the distributor in Italy. So this was 2 years ago. And I was drinking and I had my daughter who wasn't drinking anymore because she used to love Amarone and then she got completely wasted. And then after that, she stopped drinking. That's another story. So I said, why don't you try this? And she said, well, it's not bad, you
Yeah.
know? And I gave it to my husband, and he's like, I mean, it's not great, but it is drinkable.
Yeah.
So,
So,
I do agree. It's drinkable, but it's just not very good. It's not
no,
something I would choose. Also, in terms of the price point.
but can I give you the parallel? I am now on my third electric car.
Yeah.
The first electric car we could do, if we did 50 miles, 80 kilometers, you worried. And it said it did 120 or whatever, but you knew that you didn't want because you couldn't find places to charge it and you got nervous. The second one was much more than the third one.
What are you
Um,
driving now?
I've got a Hyundai Ioniq, and that
Sunday.
does 230 or 40, whatever. Now, it's
Mm.
still not perfect. You've still got to find the places that charge and work and so on. But we charge it overnight at home. It works really well, and it's very comfortable. The performance is great. My point is that if we look at alcohol-free wine in the way that I looked at my first generation of electric car,
Mm.
it was not a product that most people driving conventional petrol diesel cars would find acceptable as an alternative. You could say if you live in the center of town and you only drive a few kilometers every day, it works and you can plug it in at night. For most people, it did not really fit the bill.
No.
Today, you think about what China is already doing with its electric cars, and you've got 500-mile ranges, and you can charge them really quickly. And we know that's a one-way street. We know that's a one-way street. We're heading in one direction. What I'm saying is that you and I hopefully will have a conversation in a year or two or three, and we will say, actually, look how much better they are, just like natural wine, how
Yeah.
much more acceptable they are. And I'm also predicting, and I didn't predict it in the piece because I didn't know about Elton John when I wrote the piece. I don't believe Elton John will be the last celebrity to do that, to put his name to one. I think there are quite a few celebs out there who are not drinking, and it's an opportunity. And, I think providing that the drink is okay, not great, but drinkable. And the last thing I'd say is that some of my friends who criticize the quality of the zero alcohol wine, I could go and get some of the other wines on the market that people are drinking, and I could say, "How do you like this XX? Do you like this XXL? No. Do you like this Mucho Mas? No. Well, a lot of people are drinking those. So and this is maybe maybe a point I really wanted to a New Year's resolution that I'd love the wine industry
Yeah.
to take on board is to stop using the word I. And in fact, or indeed me and my friends, or me and my customers, or indeed you and the team at Vinitaly, essentially what we see and what we like and what we want is not necessarily representative
Yeah, of
of a lot
course.
of other people. And as a
It's
wine
called
industry,
selective attention
that takes
in
me back to the sweetness in wine or any of these subjects. It's a light celebrity wine. When I say Elton John is launching a wine, a zero alcohol wine, I can hear all of the people watching this and out there think, yeah, but who'd buy a wine because Elton John likes it?
right.
Well, huge numbers of people are buying a wine because Kylie Minogue likes it. So we've just got to get out of our little boxes and accept that other people don't think like we do. And every time we think, yeah, well, maybe they do, I'm going to finish this on saying, just look at the politicians, people we
No,
know
no, no.
and
I
like
don't want to
us
go there. I'm
are voting for. No,
sorry.
no, I'm not going to go very far. I'm just going to say, just look at that and say, well, if they're going to do that, if they're going to vote for him or her, then the kind of wine or drink they choose is pretty secondary in the level of importance.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's close with one thing you're genuinely optimistic for the future of wine. One thing.
I think we're going to see more, and this is not necessarily a good thing, but in some ways, we're going to see more professionalism. So, yeah, we're going to probably see a lot of passionate non-professionals are going to fall out, and that's going to be very sad. Some of them, by the way, make absolute crap wine. The fact that you're passionate as an artist doesn't mean you paint great paintings or write great books. It just means you're passionate about it. A lot of these passionate people make crap wine. But we're going to see a greater professionalism come into this industry, whether we like it or not. We are going to make this industry a better place for people to want to work. And that I think is crucial. And we've seen this in the food industry where actually chefs used to be really badly paid. And over recent years, it's become a thing to be a chef. And indeed, to be a waiter is a much better place to be today than it was 20 or 30 years ago. And I think the wine industry is going to be a much more professional place. And I hope that people are going to have to be a lot more open-minded and say, right, I'm making, it's like the fashion world. He makes T-shirts, I make suits, or maybe I make suits and T-shirts like Armani. The wine industry is so siloed. It's I make this kind of wine. I don't have any time for the kind of wine he makes or she makes or whatever. We've got to understand, and somebody said yesterday, we don't want cheap wine. Well, what are people going to drink who aren't drinking expensive wine or can't afford to drink expensive wine? You need a pyramid of some kind, and we need the T-shirts. We need the T-shirts, and we need the $2,000, $5,000 fashion, and we need the whole thing. But we need it all to work commercially more effectively than it does today.
All right, that sounds good, Robert. Of course, we can talk about hours and hours, but this is a good start. And congratulations on your Substack. It's, of course, I love reading you and in all
thank you. I look forward
to
seeing you in Verona soon.
Or elsewhere.
Thank you.
Alrighty, thank you, Robert.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of On the Road Edition, hosted by Stevie Kim. Join her again next week for more interesting content on the Italian wine scene. You can also find us at ItalianWinePodcast.com or wherever you get your pods. You can check out our YouTube channel, Mama Jumbo Shrimp, to watch these interviews and the footage captured at each location. Chin chin!